Welcome to Coffee Commerce. My name is Sean Ramett, and I'm the grandson of a coffee farmer from Guyana, South America. On Coffee Commerce, we talk about the stories behind coffee as they relate to business, commerce, and society. We have been talking about the influence of coffee and coffee houses in the areas of the arts and business. Incredibly, coffee houses had a major influence in other areas of finance as well. Lombard Street and Change Alley had become the open-air meeting place of London's mercantile community before Thomas Gresham founded the Royal Exchange in 1565. And this is where we start with another coffee house, Jonathan's Coffee House. Today there's a plaque in London that depicts the site of Jonathan's Coffee House, and it states that it's the first site of the London Stock Exchange. The London Stock Exchange began with this atmosphere bringing buyers and sellers together, setting market prices in an open atmosphere, in a coffee house. Jonathan Miles opened his coffee house around 1680 in Change, or what later became Exchange Alley, in the City of London. One of Jonathan's patrons, John Casting, publishes a list of currency, stocks, and commodity prices at Jonathan's Coffee House. It includes prices for gold, silver, as well as precious metal coins called ducats. This becomes a popular place for these listings. By 1698, John Casting used Jonathan's Coffee House to post the prices of stocks and commodities, and became the first evidence of a systematic exchange of securities in London. That very same year, rowdy and even rude dealers from the Royal Exchange were expelled. These dealers were also known as stock jobbers. They moved their practice from the Royal Exchange to Jonathan's Coffee House, as well as to Garraway's Coffee House, which we will speak about in another episode. It was the scene of a number of critical events in the history of share trading, including the South Sea Bubble from 1711 to 1720, and the Panic of 1745. The South Sea Company was a financial and trading organization, mainly dealing with Spanish America. It received trading rights of the South Seas in return for financing the British government's debt. Shares were issued, and unrealistic expectations had been set. A monopoly on various trades was the vision. When it was discovered that the directors of the profitless company had sold out, it became a massive panic, and the major financial crash occurred in the City of London. Huge amounts of fortunes were lost. Change Alley in the South Sea Bubble is a painting from Edward Matthew Ward that still stands today at the Tate Gallery. It depicts stock jobbers as opportunists and investors as foolish. Contemporary songs and sarcastic decks of cards are described in Charles Mackay's Memoirs of Extraordinary Popular Delusions and the Madness of Crowds. Although lampooning and lamenting the collapse of the South Sea Company became a popular and enjoyable pastime, it was said that the basic outline of the Anglo structure of finances were set by 1723, a complementary set of private, commercial, and merchant banks, all enjoying continuous access to an active, liquid secondary market for financial assets, especially government debt. The South Sea Bubble proved to be the sudden birth of the financial capital markets in England. Next came the Panic of 1745, where in and around Jonathan's Coffee House, Londoners saw themselves lined up in queues at the banks, as word had reached London that the Jacobite rebels were edging closer to London. In one day, they lined up at banks, took out their assets, their finances, and their valuables, and fled London for the country. Even King George II had his boats and yachts ready to make his escape. In the end, there was no need for the panic, but the panic did leave its influence. Jonathan's was just destroyed by a fire in 1748 and then rebuilt. In 1761, a club of 150 brokers and jobbers was formed to trade stocks. The club built its own building in 1773 in Sweeting's Alley, and it was dubbed as New Jonathan's, but was renamed the Stock Exchange, now officially called the London Stock Exchange. The original Jonathan served as the home of the lottery office until it was destroyed by fire in 1748. Change Alley, or Exchange Alley, as it became known as, was a tight alleyway connecting shops and coffee houses in an old neighborhood of the City of London. It served as a convenient shortcut from the Royal Exchange on Cornhill to the post office and other buildings on Lombard Street, and still today remains one of the number of alleys linking these two streets. Shops once located in Exchange Alley included ship chandlers, makers of navigation instruments, goldsmiths, and others. The 17th and 18th century coffee houses of Exchange Alley, especially Jonathan's and Garraway's, which we will talk about next, became the early venue for the lively trading of shares and commodities. These activities were the precursor to the modern-day London Stock Exchange. Sound familiar? It might. There's a similar tone to this as to the Lloyd's Coffee House from Lombard Street, which was the forerunner for Lloyd's List, Lloyd's Register, and Lloyd's of London. It becomes more and more evident with each of these unique coffee houses the impact that they had, not just in England or London, but in the world around them. Jonathan's Coffee House became the birthing ground for the London Stock Exchange, just like Lloyd's Coffee House became the birthing ground for Lloyd's of London, Lloyd's Register, and Lloyd's List. And other coffee houses became birthing places for magazines, newspapers, and so on. Next, we will look at Garraway's and the influence that Garraway's had in the same time frame, similar to Jonathan's. But that's another story for another cup of coffee. Thank you.